Hello, it's sunset on Thursday, 17th of June 2021, and I have put it to the vote on Twitter, that well-known bastion of truthfulness and honesty. I asked a question, which was, do you want to hear about Depeche Mode in 1983? Do you want to hear about Brett Anderson and the Tears? Do you want to hear about Stanley Kubrick? Or do you want to hear about New Order's 2001 album, Get Ready? The resounding winner, with probably about 40% of the votes, was New Order. So today I'm going to be talking about this New Order album, the singles that go with it, the box sets, live shows, t-shirts, lineup changes and all that type of stuff. Now I've got the window open because it is astonishingly very warm indeed out there, and so therefore you can hear the sounds of the birds singing to themselves and possibly to their potential boy or girlfriends. Probably the avian equivalent of do you come here often? I mean, I don't know, it's been a very long time since I've done anything like that. I wouldn't have a clue how people talk. Also, since it is sunset, the light is on, and so it will look a little different. So we start off with the year 2001, beginning of 2001, and New Order have just come off the last show that they played at the Alexandra Palace on 31st of December 1998, which was the last show that was performed by the classic four-piece lineup of Bernard, Stephen, Jillian and Peter Hook. And then there was about a year of activity where the band kind of splintered and they carried on and finished off their respective parts of their solo careers, which I've mentioned in a previous episode. So that would have been the third electronic album, Twisted Tenderness, the second Monaco album, Monaco, and the second other two album, Super Highways. And then the band went back into the studio, started writing material, recording material and sticking it all together for various other releases. And they started off with a couple of basic kind of introductory positions to see where they were going. So they had a couple of goes at doing some work for the Mission Impossible 2 movie. In the end, I think it was John Woo chose Metallica, who are still headlining stadiums on the moon, to do their song I Disappear. New Order did a couple of versions of the Mission Impossible theme, taking the original Lalo Schifrin version from the 60s and trying to New Orderize it, if New Orderizing something is a word. They also recorded some material for the soundtrack to the film by Danny Boyle, The Beach, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, which was released in 2000, and released their first song in 7 years, which was called Brutal, which is on the soundtrack to The Beach. The soundtrack to The Beach is somewhere up there on my shelf of soundtrack CDs, and rather than me stand up and get it and show you it, you'll just have to take it on trust that I've got it. I definitely bought it. The Beach also has All Saints Pure Shores on it, I think, which was their biggest hit, and the song from that album that everybody remembers. New Order's Brutal was, by the way, was the first MP3 I ever downloaded, so I was an earlier adopter of internet technology. I was a member of the ceremony mailing list, which was how I got to find out about the warm-up show by New Order at the Manchester Apollo in 1998, which is still in my top 3 gigs of all time. And the track Brutal from the Beach soundtrack was available as a low-quality MP3, which I downloaded using a dial-up connection in my flat in Walsall in January, actually it was December 1999. I think I downloaded it, and the first time I saw The was on the 31st of January 2000 at the London Garage, and I remember, I think the day after, that was the day that the Beach soundtrack was released, and I bought the Beach on CD. I could be making all of this up. My memory is pretty hazy after 21.5 years. The fact I can even remember my own name is pretty staggering, and frankly I deserve a participation medal for that alone. So the year 2001 was a pretty eventful year for New Order, and there were some major changes ahead. Nobody knew how terrible this year was going to be, but if you've been the reader of these books, fast forward chapter and verse, and Peter Hook's tome, I Did Everything, It Was All Me, the rest of them are bastards, then you'll understand just how different everything was. So first and foremost, I think probably have to talk about what was happening with Stephen Morris and Jillian Gilbert. So in March 2001 or thereabouts, Jillian decided to retire from playing in New Order. I think it's probably charitable to say that she decided to retire. The decision was made for her, and this is in no way a criticism of anybody. Family is really, really important. Health is really, really important. It's more important than being in a band, and it's more important than work. You only get one go on the merry-go-round that is life, and no one is going to spend their time at the end of it going, I wish I spent more time at work. As detailed in Stephen Morris's book, Stephen's father died. The state of Stephen's father's financial affairs was chaotic, I think, and he spent a large portion of 2001 trying to unravel that, being the person who inherited that particular position. And also, Stephen and Jillian had a daughter who, as it turned out, had a very serious health condition called transverse myelitis. And one of the potential outcomes of that health condition is potentially permanent disability. So let's say you've got a child who's maybe 3-4 years old, you're in a rock band, your husband is the drummer, and your child is potentially going to be disabled for the rest of their life. You can't pack up your life, take the kids on tour all across the world and be a member of the band. It's not realistic to do so unless you have a full-time paid nanny who goes on tour with you, or you pay somebody to look after your children while you spend months at a time going around America and playing in arenas. It must have been a really, really difficult decision, and I think that Jillian found it difficult. I mean, I saw her at the side of the stage at the shows after she had left the group, and sometimes she was dancing and sometimes she was quite upset that she wasn't on stage. You know, if you've been part of a band for 20 years and you have to leave the band and it's not your decision to go, your hand has been forced by that, you know, effectively it's a medical retirement, and that's not a decision that I think anybody takes particularly easily. Stephen was still a member of the group and playing drums, but what I found was that, and I think it's more brutally detailed, I think, in Peter Hook's book, Them Lot of Bastards, that you know, the financial construction of the band now changed. So Bernard had taken probably 50% of the band's monies, as opposed to the 25% equal split amongst the four of them that previously had happened. Peter Hook, I think, renegotiated his position from 1993. So whereas before Bernard got 50% and the other three members got 16.6% each, in the 2001 era of the band, after Jillian had left, Bernard got 50%, Peter got 30%, Stephen I think got 15%, and Jillian got 5%, which according to Peter Hook is a fair and accurate representation of the division of work that took place during the recording of the album. You think about it from Stephen Morris's point of view, is that you've effectively, your pay has been more than halved, and you're still on stage bashing the drums, and not only that, but you don't get to take your wife on tour with you. To me, it seems to be the start of, or the beginning of, the end, I think, for the band, and the start and the beginning of where fractures that have become permanent in the New Order body, which will probably never be repaired, have started to occur. I'm very sympathetic to Stephen, actually, here. His role in recording Get Ready was first and foremost to just lay down tons and tons of drum tracks, and he spent, you know, work just playing loads and loads of drum tracks, and then Bernard and Hooky kind of put together the songs using those drum tracks as a bed for it. Effectively, Stephen just recorded drum tracks in his own on an empty room, and the rest, and then Peter and Bernard kind of constructed the songs around those. A really strange way of writing songs, but not vastly different from how Bernard was writing parts of Republic, because what he was doing when Republic was being written was sometimes swapping out parts of songs, writing new parts and putting them in. And you know, there are a couple of songs on the album Republic which I think Peter Hook isn't sure if he actually played on them. Now, let's not get into the Bernard versus Peter argument. That's for a completely different story and a completely different episode. what we found was that around about this period, the classic four-piece version of the band had ceased to exist. So Stephen was starting to feel sidelined. Jillian had left the group. Bernard was kind of taking the lead. Hooky was taking quite a lot of credit for it. Phil Cunningham had come into the group. Now Phil Cunningham played guitar with Electronic, with Johnny Marr and Bernard Sumner, and before that was in a group called Marion, who I saw in about 1996. And Phil's role was to play guitar and then later to play keyboards. And because Phil's first instrument was guitar, as I understand it, that meant that that helped lean the band more towards the rockier side of things. Also, without Jillian being involved in the writing sessions, Jillian's touch is really only noticeable by its absence on the albums, especially Waiting for the Siren's Call, which is the album that was made after Get Ready. Those albums were heavier, they had more guitars in it, they had more sharp edges, they were closer, I think, probably to the sound of Joy Division than any New Order album since 1980. And London Records, obviously having paid an enormous amount of money to the band, were pretty insistent that they were going to get their money's worth out of the group. So middle 2001, there are kind of rumours going around on the ceremony mailing list that Jillian's not in the group, that there's going to be somebody else that's going to be playing. At the start, it was kind of portrayed that Jillian might be not touring as opposed to not being a member of the group, but that quickly became fairly clear that Jillian just wasn't in the band. When the group formed in 1980, and obviously when Joy Division formed in 1977, I think the approach that the band took, although it was a verbal agreement, was that if somebody left the group, the name of the group would change. Obviously when Ian died, Joy Division became New Order. When Jillian left, they didn't change the name of the band. And in order to support the hypothesis that Peter Hook has, that Jillian didn't do very much in the group, since then he's constantly advanced the position that Jillian contributed very little towards the group. There's an element, I think, of being quite unsympathetic around that in Peter Hook's book, Bastards. All right, let's call it Substance because that's what it's called. He quite clearly kind of points out that he had a very ill daughter at one point, that maybe making music wasn't first and foremost in his mind at the time, and yet when the same kind of thing happens, obviously every illness and health issue is different, but when Stephen and Jillian's daughter was very poorly, is that somehow it becomes a confirmation of the fact that Jillian never contributed anything anyway, as opposed to perhaps the reality of the situation. Obviously there are 4 people in the room, they've all written their versions of the stories, and I recommend that you all read them. Jillian's version of it is in a Pitchfork article, which I will post a link to down there. But effectively, Jillian left the group didn't change its name, and then the narrative that at least one member of the group was starting to spin was that Jillian never did anything anyway, she just did as she was told by the others, which strengthened the point of view from their perspective that it was still New Order when somebody left. That gets more complicated later on as more people leave the group, but that is a story for 10 years from this episode. So the rumours were going around that Jillian wasn't in the group anymore, and there were also kind of rumours that there was new material that was being recorded and being released, and as it turned out, in August 2001, New Order released their first new material for 8 years, and London Records, obviously having invested a significant sum of money in the band to start with, wanted to get their money's worth out of it. This is one of those. It's the single Crystal. This is the 12-inch with Bedrock remixes on it, which was released in a lot of formats. Crystal is based upon a track that Bernard had recorded with Corwin Dalek and Cyber Secrecy, also called Crystal, which is available on the internet, which is an earlier recording of it. Effectively, it's a guest vocal that he put for another artist that was then became repurposed and became another New Order track. So New Order took that vocal and then turned it, bent it upside down and started again. Crystal was released on a multitude of formats, so there's about 9 12-inches of it. I have one. There was also 2 CD singles, a DVD single, which is one of the most terrible words in the human lexicon, and the Japanese EP. So I'm going to talk through these. Crystal, by the way, is a fantastic track. It's a New Order classic, and it doesn't matter who plays on it. It is just one of their best songs ever. So the CD single, let's take this one here, because CD singles were very popular. Had the 7-inch mix of the track, a B-side called Behind Closed Doors, and an edit of the Bedrock mix. The unedited version of the Bedrock mix is here on the 12-inch single. Now, there was a second CD in the UK, thanks to the vagaries of the British phonographic industry, which had CD2. CD2 was limited to 3 remixes: the radio edit of Bedrock, a Lee Coombs remix, and a Stefan K and John Creamer main remix edit. Thanks to British chart positions, no single could be more than 20 minutes in length and have no more than 3 songs on it. So there's some pretty brutal edits going out of various remixes. DVD single here contains the video directed by Johan Renck, the audio Behind Closed Doors, a version of Temptation filmed in 1998, and live video of Isolation and True Faith from the Reading Festival in 1998. Although those live videos of Isolation and True Faith are, from memory, quite short. On the other hand, Reading 1998 saw the release saw a proper release on the Crystal Japanese EP. This is a fantastic piece of design, and at the time, hard as bastard nails to get, to put it technically. Look at that lovely CD design. If you're into design, this is a fantastic bit of design here. But Crystal was backed with 4 live tracks from the Reading Festival: True Faith, Temptation, Atmosphere and Isolation. Now those 4 tracks were released on the Reading DVD, which I've mentioned previously. And there was also an American CD single that features 9 remixes of Crystal, and Behind Closed Doors as well, with a slightly different cover. Now what you'll see is, you know, all of these visual designs are based around the concept of kind of like a red stripe and pictures and imagery of an individual. As I have read at the time, is that, you know, the original sleeve artwork for Get Ready was originally planned to actually be mirrored, so that the sleeve artwork wouldn't be an individual. Yeah, so it wouldn't be this. Now the reason they chose this is because this is considerably cheaper than having a reflective silver cover with print on it, even though that never stopped Kiss's Greatest Hits album, which has got a big fat silver cover on. Or maybe it's alive, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of Kiss. I think as an idea, Kiss are far better than a band, and I think the best thing about Kiss is definitely not the records. So the album followed up, which was released in late August 2001, and a tour was announced as well. So they played a number of shows in advance of the release of Get Ready. These shows featured the new 5-piece lineup of the group, which had Phil Cunningham on guitar and keyboards, and making a guest appearance on a number of shows in Europe and the US, Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins. And there were people that clearly were enormous fans of the Smashing Pumpkins that would go and see New Order with you know, Smashing Pumpkins logos painted on their faces and sit down the front crying whilst their hero played extra guitar for a band they'd never heard of. People, man, they're strange. I know, I am one. So Get Ready was released, I think, in September 2001. At this point, Billy wasn't playing with the group anymore. They'd gone back to the 4-piece lineup with Phil replacing Jillian. And Get Ready was released as a 10-track CD. It was given a limited press as an LP. This is the 2015 remaster. And there was they really went to town on the various versions of it. Some rough mixes had been circulating on CDRs. If you want to look long and hard, you can find rough mixes of Get Ready on the internet as low quality MP3s ripped from CDRs and reference copies that people associated with the band had put together. It's fascinating stuff to listen to all those different mixes. It's also really tedious. It makes me really glad I'm not a musician, because I'm kind of listening to two mixes of a track and going, how can you tell the difference between one and the other? That's probably why I'm not a musician. Here's a promotional CD for Get Ready, which originally was quite expensive. I bought it many years after the album came out in a card sleeve. There are no alternate mixes on this. But what you would find is the 10-track album, which has Crystal, 60 Miles an Hour, Turn My Way, which has vocals by Billy Corgan on, Vicious Streak, Primitive Notion, Slow Jam, a track called Rock the Shack with Bobby Gillespie, of Primal Scream on vocals, Someone Like You, Close Range, and Run Wild. If you listen to the rough mixes of them, all these tracks have different names. They have names like Submarine and Sabotage and, I don't know, Fire Range or something, I don't know. There's a lot of different mixes out there and they're all called different names. So the final tracks, obviously New Order were naming their songs, were made often at the last minute and often are very different from the versions that they've been working with. If you look at a New Order set list, for example, even to this day, Your Silent Face is sometimes referred to as KW1 because that was the working title that it had and appeared on a couple of the cassette editions of Power, Corruption and Lies as KW1. But no, Get Ready was an interesting album. So let's go through the CD with the 10 tracks on it. So Crystal, absolute classic, 60 Miles an Hour. That is a very interesting song. It's clearly a hit single all the way through, but what it also is probably one of my least favourite New Order singles. Then there is Vicious Streak. There's Turn My Way, which has got Billy Corgan on vocals, and the early version of Turn My Way, which I think is called Shipwreck, doesn't have Billy on it. That version is circulating on the internet. I will post a link to it. It's okay. I've never seen them play Turn My Way live, and I'm not expecting I ever will do. Then there's Vicious Streak, which I think is the first track apart from Crystal that has the word Vicious Streak in the title. So it has the title somewhere in the lyric, as indeed does Primitive Notion. Then there's Slow Jam, which is a fairly mediocre New Order song. It reminds me a lot of Everyone Everywhere. It's a mid-paced, somewhat guitar-y, repetitive song that kind of starts, carries on a bit, doesn't really go anywhere and stops. Then there's Rock the Shack, which is the worst New Order song ever recorded. In fact, it's so much the worst New Order song ever recorded that when the band played Finsbury Park in 2002, Bernard said, well, if you like, if you want us to play this song, cheer, and if you want us to play Rock the Shack, get your willies out. Obviously everyone cheered. Not so many people got their willies out because firstly it's illegal in public, don't do it. Secondly, Rock the Shack's not a great track. I've seen them play it live twice and I've been bored stiff. Sorry guys. Then there's Someone Like You, which at one point was mooted to be a potential single. Then there's Close Range, which is a banger. Sadly the band don't play that live anymore. And then there's Run Wild as well. And Run Wild is a song that was kind of written by Bernard from the perspective of Stephen and Jillian thinking about their child who was very poorly. The lyric comes, when Jesus comes to take your hand, I won't let go, I won't let go, is the key lyric that's in there. So London Records clearly really wanted to get their money's worth out of it. So you have the booklet here for Get Ready, which is based upon photographs which I think were taken in Berlin. I could be wrong. And detail fairly anonymous things, really. I still think that the original potential cover, which was going to be that silver image with a red streak across it, is far better. So on my copy of the CD, I have rearranged the booklet so that it looks as close to that as can be. Obviously, rearranging the booklet is possible. Most of the time, when you've got bands like Megadeth, all of their artwork is terrible. You can't rearrange the booklet. And CD copies also came with this promotional leaflet to remind you New Order had other things that you should buy so that London Records can still make money. There was also a promotional kind of flip book which was released at around about the same time. I seem to remember it being available in record shops and also kind of given away at the gig, which was just this. Effectively, it was the big red streak. You opened it out like that, and it also had all the pictures from the LP sleeve there. So Crystal was released on the 13th of August. Get Ready was released on the 27th of August. There was a website which is probably no longer extant called newordergetready.com. I have no memory of that website. What I do remember is that it was released on the bank holiday Monday after the Reading Festival, and in those days you couldn't get you could buy tickets. Most people didn't have the internet at home, so you bought tickets for gigs when you were at work, or you rang up. And I remember going to an internet cafe in Reading the day after the Reading Festival. I think I saw Green Day or the White Stripes or someone. No idea why. And tried to buy tickets for New Order from an internet cafe in a Debenhams in Reading, of all places, 20 years ago. Luckily, I got tickets for the shows. Now, the vinyl version of Get Ready was very, very limited indeed, and I wasn't buying vinyl at the time, apart from a few 12-inch singles. I wasn't buying vinyl, not because vinyl wasn't cool, but because I lived in a small flat. I wasn't earning very much money. I had no space. I was making my decisions on what I bought on the grounds of, well, how much space is it going to take up on my walls? Have I got enough space? And Get Ready did not sell in great numbers on LP. I remember, what was it, 2001, I went into a HMV that were quite literally had piles of Morrissey albums, Cure albums like Blood Flowers, Morrissey albums like Maladjusted, that were like $3.99 because they just could not sell them. They couldn't sell them. People weren't buying it. Everyone was buying the shiny pack of MP3s in a box called a CD. And that's where they were, because CDs had low manufacturing costs. They cost probably £1 to manufacture, and they could sell them for 10, 12, 15 pounds. And vinyl, people weren't buying it, and the numbers that people were buying it in were really small. So the vinyl edition of Get Ready in 2001 was both produced in very, very limited numbers, and it was pressed on quite thin vinyl, and it wasn't particularly good. They didn't used to do test pressings in the 90s and the early 2000s because they figured it didn't matter. It wasn't worth it. Not enough people were buying a record, so they didn't bother with test pressings. So when they came to doing the vinyl versions of all the albums in 2015, this is the 2015 remaster of Get Ready. And I must say, having listened to this vinyl version, it's a lovely cut, and I can't tell the slightest bit of difference between this and the CD, apart from the fact that it comes on a big black disc as opposed to a small shiny silver disc. It's exactly the same in pretty much every way, apart from the matrix numbers that are on there and the exact mastering, which has minuscule differences in volume, presumably so they can say it's the 2015 remaster. They can sell it to you again, and also that it gives you an opportunity, if you've got the original, to make a bit of money out of it. Now, sadly, the inner sleeve on the 2015 edition, as you will see here, is still made out of quite thin material, and so therefore the weight of the vinyl disc will eat its way through the bottom. In fact, it had eaten its way through the bottom because it was cheaply made and it's thin paper before I'd even bought this, I think, because when I opened it, it already had that hole in there. But I was like, I can't be bothered to send it back now. So this is the 2015 version, and just quickly looking at it, aside from the barcode and this sticker, and there's a Sound of Vinyl thing that's in there, no way could you tell it wasn't the original. Now, there was a second single that was released from the album. Got mildly complicated because it came in two forms. This is the first one. The vinyl only version was Someone Like You, which was a double 12-inch of remixes of the track Someone Like You. Two 12-inch singles, well packed, well pressed, and all That just looks really nice. A lovely bit of design. But Someone Like You was never released on CD as a single. Instead, Someone Like You was used as B-sides on the second single. So the proper second single from the album is 60 Miles an Hour, which has CD1, CD2, and the old-fashioned terrifying DVD single. Again, not as bad as the cassette single or the mini disc single, but still pretty horrific. So 60 Miles an Hour, the first CD has a track called Sabotage, which at one point was in running to make it on the album, and it has a Funk to Void remix of Someone Like You, which is not great. The second CD has a remix of 60 Miles an Hour, the Superman Lovers mix, and the Someone Like You, James Holden heavy dub, and Future Shock vocal. And by the way, the Future Shock vocal is a banger. It's brilliant, but it has a 3-minute instrumental beginning, which is pretty ropey. The DVD single, I'm afraid to say, this one was on a shelf at one point, does have some water damage, but as you can see, but the DVD single has the video, Sabotage, and a radio edit of 60 Miles an Hour. Now the video of 60 Miles an Hour has a different audio track. It's not that exciting. What I will say is that the band started playing live shows. They didn't play that many. I think they played 35 shows for Get Ready, which was meant to be their comeback album, bearing in mind Republic had 13 live shows in it. So they played 3 times as many shows, but they still didn't make much of an impact. I saw them 4 times on that tour. I saw them three nights at Brixton Academy. The set was exactly the same each one of the 3 nights, apart from on the second night, instead of playing Rock the Shack, they played Ruined in a Day, which was the only time I saw New Order play Ruined in a Day. And I don't understand why, because it's a fantastic live track. And I saw them play Finsbury Park in 2002. Now, it seemed that the band might actually go out and do some work, but where some of their contemporaries and their peers had made the effort, New Order always seemed to step back from doing a little bit too much work. Maybe they've got no work ethic. That's not necessarily the case now. Or maybe at the time they were just dipping their toes back into playing live. But 35 shows to plug an album when you're New Order size. So for example, I think they played 6 or 7 shows in the US, and that was mostly supporting outdoors before the album came out, supporting Moby. They played, I think, some European shows. I think they played 3 or 4 headline shows in Europe, and then they came back and headlined some festivals in the summer. They played some shows in Australia in January and February 2002, and there was some debate about whether Stephen Morris was going to play drums for those shows. And it seemed to me, certainly judging from what's in some of the books here, that the other members of New Order didn't seem that bothered about Stephen playing drums, and were quite happy with somebody else to do it. I think that seemed a little bit, for a band that didn't do a huge amount of work, that seemed a little heartless, considering New Order had stopped touring because at least one member of the band didn't want to tour. That when one of the other members of the band didn't want to tour, the rest of the band just went, well, fuck it, we'll just carry on, we'll get somebody else. But as it stood, Stephen played the shows, but came pretty close to not playing the shows. And early 2002 saw the release of a number of, I think for the first time, I think London Records realised that maybe the album hadn't sold as well as they wanted it to. Maybe there was still an amount to be recouped from the advance. And New Order had managed to leave the best track from the album sessions off the album. They had a track called Here to Stay, which was recorded and produced by the Chemical Brothers, and they stuck it on the soundtrack to the film 24-Hour Party People, which is a fictionalised version of the life and times of Factory Records. Here to Stay is an incredible track. It's the best thing out of the whole period. It should be track 2 on Get Ready. It isn't. I don't know why. I'd massively changed the running order of Get Ready, by the way. So I'd whip Rock the Shack off, I'd replace it with Brutal, I'd take Slow Jam out completely, and I'd slot Here to Stay in as track 2. By the way, and I'd make Slow Jam and Rock the Shack B-sides, and that's more than they deserve, to be honest. Here to Stay is a fantastic song that New Order didn't play live until 2012, 10 years after the track came out, which is pretty shocking. Naturally, Here to Stay got loads and loads of releases, loads of different formats. I forgot to point out to you, when I was talking about 60 miles an hour at least 3 minutes ago, here's a promo CDR of it. I'm sure you can sleep safely in your beds now knowing that I've remembered to include that. So the first kind of release of Here to Stay is a one-track promo CD featuring the standard red stripe identity, which the band used across a lot of the material around about the same time. Lovely little promo CD, just a one-tracker, nothing too exciting there. There's 2 CD singles, here and here, and DVD single. Now, let's try not to break everything that's in the house. If you look carefully at these, what you'll find is actually these are just 2 treated versions of the same photograph. The same photograph is a scene shot at a recreation of the Hacienda nightclub during the filming of the 24-Hour Party People movie in, I think, late 2001. That was also repeated here and became the going away party for the Hacienda, because the Hacienda itself didn't get a closing party, it just closed. There was no, this is the end of the best nightclub that Manchester will ever have. So Here to Stay had a radio edit. It had a full-length version which was 5 minutes long on it, and it had an extra B-side called Player in the League, which was a kind of football themed song. Potentially, I think Player in the League might have been thought about possibly being released as a kind of World Cup 2002 kind of track, but that never happened, and that I have nothing to back that up apart from wild supposition and fan theories. And Here to Stay got a second CD release, which was the radio edit backed with a Felix the House Cat mix, which is the extended Glitz mix, absolutely fantastic remix by the way, and the Scumfrog dub mix. No memories of the Scumfrog dub mix at all, apart from to say that there was actually a proper retail 12-inch of Here to Stay that had what was called the unedited version of Crystal on it. The unedited version of Crystal has 20 seconds of extra guitar on there. Now there was also a DVD single, and the DVD single had the video, which features John Sims, who plays Bernard Sumner in the film, miming to the vocal. Also has a radio edit. It has the remix by Felix the House Cat. And it's got 30-second clips. Aren't you lucky? 30-second clips of 24-Hour Party People, the movie. I bought it because it had New Order written on it. I shouldn't have bought it because it's no good. Now there was a couple of other releases that came out. Summer 2002, perhaps quite a brazen move here, was the release of England New Order's World in Motion, 12 years after it became a #1, backed with a new track called Such a Good Thing, and backed with a remix, the No Alla Violenza mix, and the original one. If you have the original World in Motion CD single, or 12-inch, you have no reason to buy this, apart from the fact there's a track on it called Such a Good Thing, which you can't get anywhere else. That's the only reason I bought it. No other reason for buying it, and that's probably why the single bombed in the charts. And the band then kind of carried on a little. They did a couple of other things, so they were still playing live. They filmed a concert video called 511 at the London Finsbury Park on the 9th of June 2002. The weather was atrocious. I was there, and if you know where to look, you can see me bouncing up and down in the crowd, wearing a pair of Doc Martens and a pair of very, very muddy shoes and trousers, and it was awful. In fact, the weather was so bad we didn't turn up until after Echo and the Bunnymen had finished at about 7:30 at night. We quite literally made it there, saw New Order, and then pissed off home during the last song, which was Your Silent Face, so that we could go home. It was a awful day. The show on DVD is considerably better, but it's still not amazing. The weather was dreadful. The sun came out for about 95 minutes. The band were on stage for 90 of those 95 minutes, and we were not looking forward to it at all. It was the last show on the tour that I saw. The DVD is very mildly edited. Primarily the in-between song banter is drastically reduced, which is good because most of it wasn't very funny. And the version of World in Motion during the encore, featuring the band's roadie doing the Keith Allen rap, was removed from release. By the way, this has a number of audio tracks on it, a number of different mixes, such as I think two. It has a Dolby mix, a 5.1 mix, and a DTS 5.1 mix. At least two of those mixes, I can never remember which ones, are appallingly bad, and one of them sounds almost as good as being there. So the audio on this DVD isn't amazing. The DVD was later reissued in a slightly different cover, featuring this photo here of Sir Peter of Hook playing bass during the show. And the extras that are on this DVD include a kind of like a backstage documentary with little snippets of little songs from elsewhere in the band's career, including the Manchester Apollo show, which, as I've mentioned before, was legendary, and the Alexandra Palace one, I think, was mentioned in there as well, and a couple of other bits where they have interviews with fans. I wasn't involved in those interviews with the fans because the rain was terrible and it was absolutely atrocious, and putting it technically, fucking chucking it down, really bad weather. So, coming up to the end of 2002 came the release of New Order's first official box set, Retro, 4 discs, one called Pop, one called Fan, one called Club, one called Live. Pop was compiled by Miranda Sawyer. Fan was compiled by a guy called John McCready, who I've never heard of. Club was compiled by Mike Pickering, and Live was compiled and chosen by Bobby Gillespie. When this was released, it got a thorough bollocking from everybody on the ceremony mailing list and the New Order online forums, because hardly anything on it was rare, unusual, or unreleased. If you want us to spend big money and buy 4 CDs, you better put something on it that's worthwhile. So Pop was just a compilation of singles that had been thrown up in order and then landed randomly, but didn't actually have, some of the big singles, and was also had Brutal, Slow Jam, and Everyone Everywhere on it. Not very pop indeed. Fan was all album tracks and a couple of B-sides, nothing too exciting. Club was just a bunch of remixes which had been compiled in an extremely random fashion, but also included well-known 12-inch remixes of Bizarre Love Triangle, Shell Shock, the 7-inch mix of Touched by the Hand of God, and Everything's Gone Green, that everyone's already had, by the way, on Substance. And Live was just a compendium of pretty crappy live tracks, including Elijah, which appears twice, The Perfect Kiss appears on this twice, Fine Time twice, Regret twice, I think, was it some other... Anyway, there's lots of duplication on here, and not duplication in a way that made sense. So, for example, if you're going to do a Club remixes CD, what about putting in the 12-inch version of Round and Round? What about putting in the version of Run that's never been on a CD before? What about putting in Evil Dust, for example, that's only on the compilation album? What about those type of tracks? What about using the Peel Session versions of tracks like Touched by the Hand of God? What about B-sides like Such a Good Thing, Sabotage, Player in the League, Behind Closed Doors? Where's Here to Stay? It's only available as an instrumental mix. It was a shitty box set, and it was poorly compiled, and it smacked of contractual obligation, so much so that the band later announced a special limited edition 3,000 copy bonus disc that you could get if you only bought it from HMV, that had all the stuff people actually wanted to hear on, such as a previously unreleased recording of Temptation from 1998, a live version of Transmission, a previously unreleased remix of True Faith, the Pink Noise Morel mix, which had not been officially released, an original mix of Run Wild by Steve Osborne, which is an alternate take from the album, the live video version of The Perfect Kiss, and a previously unreleased 18-minute version of Elijah. All stuff that should have been on the box set in the first bloody place. So that box set, thumbs down, pretty crappy. And then there was also a compilation called International, which was yet another greatest hits album, which I didn't buy because I didn't need a third greatest hits album, but it was backed up with a single release, some remixes by Cormer and Bones and Arthur Baker of confusion, which depended on which version you bought. Some of the remixes had the 1983 vocal on, and some of the remixes had the 1987 re-recording vocal on, and it was lucky dip as to which one you got. Anyway, this CD single remixes the Cormer and Bones mix is pretty good. The Arthur Baker mix is totally forgettable. I don't remember anything else about the rest of it. That brings us to the end of the Get Ready period of New Order. It was pretty busy, and I think the band didn't treat their artistic output, I think, with the care and attention that I think the band deserved at the time. I think that they made some bad decisions, especially around retro and international, and I think they made some, perhaps, in retrospect, damaging decisions around the band's business structure. But that's not my decision to make. I don't get to make those decisions. As an observer outside of it, I got to see the band play live 4 times. They were pretty good, but obviously it wasn't quite the same. They carried on acting in a way that made me think that maybe they hadn't really even noticed that Jillian wasn't there anymore. And it's not my favourite period of the band. In retrospect, it's another New Order album, and there are good ones and there are bad ones, and this one sits in the middle of the pack, but it's not the glorious return to form everyone was hoping for. But now I'm running out of time, so I'm going to stop here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some links down there to various mixes and live shows and so on and so forth. Hopefully this hasn't been too tedious. It is what you voted for, so I aim to please. And also the next time round, I don't know what I'm going to be talking about, but I'm sure it's going to be less New Order-y than this. Stay lovely in the comments. Stay beautiful. I will see you again. Thank you. Bye.